morning. I wanted to start recording these early morning messages as a way to start my day. A few years ago, I kind of stumbled on morning routines, and it was a huge revelation for me because I never thought about it. I used to just get up and go. I Most of the time I'd roll out of bed kind of late, running behind, and I'd hurry up to get things done, eat breakfast, rush out of the house, and hardly pay any attention to how I was feeling and my state of mind, because I just knew, hey, get up, you have to, I have to go perform, I have to go, you know, go to work, whatever it is. I got to get up and I just got to go, and I'm used to just getting up and going. Um, Hardly ever taking any time to really like taking the day, taking the morning. And really, what got me interested in morning routines is I realized one day that I was dealing with a lot. I was dealing with a lot emotionally that I would always suppress, and it got to the point at some point where I couldn't really suppress anymore. This sun is blazing this morning. I couldn't really suppress anymore, and I had to find a way to cope. I had to find a way to dissipate the anxiety I was feeling every morning, and get rid of it, at least to give me a chance of starting my day on the right foot, and not having to drag myself all the way through until at some point I start getting into a groove. I start feeling a little bit better. It was a terrible way to start the morning, and I don't know how many other people started the morning that way. Now I'm learning that a lot of people are like that. They wake up in the morning with pounds of anxiety on them, and they just do with it what they can. They handle it however they can, um, whether they have a routine or not. A lot of people are going through this. So I'm not the only one, but at the time when I stumbled on a morning routine, I thought I was the only one. I didn't know anybody else. I didn't really talk to anybody else about it. So I, I recently started doing these videos, and this is the first one, to kind of help with that morning routine. I often will take a walk with the dog, and that'll help. Walk at night, walk in the morning. That tends to help. But every single morning, I wake up with just this massive amount of anxiety on my chest, on my stomach, anticipating the day, what could go wrong, what could happen, where I want to be, where I don't want to be, what I want to be doing, what I don't want to be doing. Your mind just throws so much at you. And up until a few years ago, I never understood why. I never understood why I dealt with so much of this. I thought I was the only one. Um, I ruminated on it. Um, I thought maybe something was wrong with me, and well, most of my life I thought something was wrong with me, and I just never had any answer for it. Never had anybody I could go and talk to. Never thought to do research on it. Didn't even know what questions to ask. So, so I just dealt with it. Same as everybody else. You just dealt with it. But a few years ago, well, I would say about 10, 11 years ago, I went through something, me and my family went through something profound. We were living in Florida, and things just weren't going right. We came to a point where we realized we couldn't afford to live in Florida anymore. We had two young kids. The wife was pretty much working just to pay for daycare. We'd reached a point where we just couldn't do it anymore. And I was already living around family in Florida. And, Florida being such an expensive state, especially in South Florida, we just exhausted every option we had as far as help. So we decided that we needed to make a move. And so our eyes turned on my wife's family. We'd been living up here in Indiana for a while. We had visited back and forth during the holidays for them to see the kids. And so we were already kind of familiar with this area, and thought, a fresh start might just be what we need. I could not have anticipated what that experience would have brought me personally. I didn't know what it would have triggered, but making that move triggered an avalanche of things to happen that I had to confront and deal with on a personal level. And that's when I began to understand that it's not just that something's wrong with me, it goes deeper than that. I started realizing that there are so many things about myself that I don't understand. And there's so many questions. Previously, when I was in Florida, tried to go to therapy in hopes of discovering, what it was that I was feeling. Uh, I tried to work through it. I tried to, distract myself with hobbies, projects, and things like that. But none of it ever worked, at least not long term. So went through that therapy, didn't help very much. Kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for therapy. And I'm not against therapy. I think it's important. I think everybody may need it at some point in their lives. Is it for everybody? I say everybody should give it a try, figure out whether or not it is for you. But for me at that time, the experience that I had with a therapist um, just wasn't good. It wasn't good. I went there for her to help me, and it seemed like she was more biased than anything else. And the connection I made to that was that she was a single mom. My mother raised me for a while as a single mom, and a lot of my issues kind of stemmed from that. And I felt like she thought I was blaming my mother for a lot of things when really I was just going through the experiences and cataloging them and just trying to figure out, where all these negative emotions came from, where all these struggles came from. And she just, I don't know, she felt some type of way, I guess. And the therapy didn't go my way at all. I felt blamed for certain things. I felt like I was being gaslighted at times. Um, and I left there. I mean, I remember pretending like it helped me. I pretended like I told her it helped me, but really I went home and I told my wife it was bullshit. Like it really didn't help me. So I had a sour taste in my mouth, when it came to therapy and stuff like that. So I thought, hell, if they can't help me, like everything else I've experienced in my life with other people, I figured if they couldn't help me, I would try to help myself. But making that move from Florida to Indiana, I had no way of anticipating just what I was going to be thrown into on a personal level, because that move triggered, and I don't even know how to say it, but that move triggered so many emotions. The experience of that move, you know, the experience of that move just really it triggered a lot. It was very frantic at the time. It was very rushed. We were in a state of panic, me and the wife. We fell down on ourselves. Um, and there are other things that happened too, which I'll detail later on, in these videos, that contributed to all that. But yeah, it really threw me into a point in my life. It was like a checkpoint in my life. It threw me into this checkpoint in my life where I had to confront everything that I had not been confronting, everything that I did not know I needed to confront, and all the underlying things that were there. So that's just I guess, a small introduction about my past and how I've come to this point. Um, Now, after we moved here, went through that hard time, things started getting a little bit better up until about, I would say, 4 years ago. And I hit another checkpoint. And most people would call this a midlife crisis, an awakening, whatever you would call it. I went through it. And it felt like, again, the rug was being pulled out from not just the rug, because when you pull a rug out from under somebody, there's still a floor. So this wasn't a rug being pulled out from under me, just like when we had to move from Florida to Indiana. That maybe was a rug. I'll consider that a rug. But what happened to me just 4 years ago, what I experienced, that one was just literally free falling. It's like somebody pulled the earth from underneath me, and I was just free falling in space. and I just had to deal with the free fall. I had to learn to not really be okay with the free fall, but I had no choice but to go through it. So, and I think that's the point I kind of want to start off from when talking about when speaking on these videos. Now, the other purpose of these videos and this channel that I'm now attempting to create is that I'm an immigrant, and I came to America back in 1990, November of 1990, from Haiti, Port-au-Prince, Haiti, where I was born in 1983. And I'll say it like this: the last time I ever remember feeling overwhelmed, overwhelmingly peaceful was at the age of 7. Specifically, I could probably remember it was somewhere around October of 1990 when I had turned 7. I think that's the last point in my life where I remember being truly happy and being just carefree. Like life was just life. I was part of it. I was having a great time. I was enjoying it, and everything was great. After that point, about November of 1990, when I came to America, that was one of those moments where it's like I was either pulled off the face of the earth and just thrown into a black hole where I was just free falling, or the earth was pulled under me from under me, and I was just free falling in space. However you want to look at it, it's the same thing. I had no tether. Um, there was a movie I remember. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was a space movie where dudes. It might have been Deep Impact, where dude astronaut was in space and his tether got cut and he just started floating into space, just further and further and further away. I remember the first time I saw that scene, it hit me so hard. Like I felt like I was in that scene. I felt like that was happening to me. The sheer terror of not knowing where you're going, where you're gonna end up, what's gonna hit you, what's coming up behind you, front of you, whatever, and not knowing how long you're gonna be able to survive. And then when you can no longer survive, what's that gonna feel like? What's death gonna feel like? I remember just feeling all of that when I saw that scene, and it's a good comparison to my life and certain checkpoints in my life where I felt exactly that. So the point of this podcast is to kind of document in a way, and I want to call it Between Two Worlds. I think that's a perfect name. It fits because on the one hand, I'm an immigrant from a different country, so I've experienced living between two worlds, and then also the emotional and psychological impact of that experience, along with my personality type. So like my personality type, like 4 years ago when I was going through what I mentioned earlier, I just had to take a deep dive into YouTube psychology. Um, I did a ton of research. I mean, I was reading articles about things uh, that I felt were attributes of myself that I just didn't understand. I didn't have names for, so I started just Googling things and just writing it out the best I could in Google and seeing what came back. Went through a bunch of different things. Went through a bunch of different I guess I don't know, disorders, symptoms, names for things. Um, some of them stuck, some of them didn't. You know, some of them I thought they explained me or parts of me, and then only to realize later on, no, it's closed, but that wasn't quite me. But anyway, I took a deep dive into that and realize later on that I guess my personality type, uh, according to the Myers-Briggs, you know, list of personalities, is INFJ. I read into them, but I'm no expert. I can't really explain them the way the YouTubers explain them. I can't explain them the way a psychologist would explain it. Um, uh, I guess that's because of my learning style. A lot of times I just can't really learn things in sequence. I'm kind of chaotic with the way I learn things. So although I listen to those things a lot, I look them up a lot. I can give you the gist of what I've taken away from them, but I can't really go into like the details and break down the personality types and the NIs and whatever those two letters mean. But I did realize after doing a shit ton of research that yes, INFJ definitely fits my personality type. Um, I did I did countless surveys online to come to it. Like I said, I exhausted probably every single option online, um, trying to figure out, trying to pinpoint, my personality type. The only thing I didn't do was actually go to a psychologist or whoever to get a diagnosis of anything. But I'm pretty sure. I'm absolutely, absolutely. Even today, when I listen to certain channels or episodes of those channels, it just still amazes me how well they can explain me to me in words that I could never come up with if I tried. So, along with that, along with being an immigrant, the emotional toll and psychological toll it takes on a person, especially at 7 years old, to come here and then have to assimilate. Then there's also my personality type and how I dealt with all those things. Um, and so that's what we'll be talking about, and that's what I'll be sitting here every morning, hopefully every morning, when I can stand to do it. I'll be talking about here, on this podcast that I'm eventually going to call Between Two Worlds. I like that name. So, to kind of start from the beginning a little bit, I'll take you back to the age of 7, and maybe a little bit prior to that. Um, Prior to me coming to America, I was your I was your quintessential, you know, happy-go-lucky baby of the family child. I had a whole community around me of people that loved me and protected me and poured into me. Um, I even though, well, I'll get to that a little bit later. But my mother wasn't around. I think she left around like 6 months to a year after I was born. She had already had plans to come to America. It uh, it was close because from what everybody tells me, around the time that she was pregnant with me, uh, there was a strong possibility that she could have already traveled to America while pregnant with me. It didn't turn out that way. She ended up giving birth to me, and somewhere around 6 months to a year, she left. And she came back periodically from time to time to visit, but it was few and far between from my memories point of view. And even with that, I don't really have a whole lot of memories of those experiences. I have like little snippets of scenes that I remember from that time. But you know, you're talking about 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. I don't know how early, what the earliest memory in a person's mind can be. But like I said, I just have snippets of those times. So I do remember her coming and visiting, spending time with us. Um, but it was just few and far between. Excuse me while I take a sip of my coffee. And so, but during her absence, I felt great. I felt, I did feel like I was missing her presence because I would always hear stories from my brothers, my sisters, and people around me, friends, family members, about her. And my mom was sort of like this legend in the community, right? So, a woman traveling to America to try to carve out a life for her family and eventually bring them all over one by one. Typically, that was what men did. Men would take on the role of traveling and doing all of that. I had uncles who went through Venezuela to get over here to America. I can't remember exactly how my mom did it, but she did it. And so I was raised with my two brothers, two sisters who are twins, and my dad. And then, like I said, we had a whole community around us. Back then in Haiti, what I remember, I kind of remember it like not really like a neighborhood. I kind of remember it like a village. Right, it was very country living. We had livestock and things like that. You know, we had people who specialized in plants and growing things, and so we just all contributed and we kind of helped each other out, type of thing. And I've longed for that ever since I came to America. I've longed for that a lot because, well, I mean, it makes sense that those were my earliest memories of when I was the happiest in my life. I cannot compare any other time in my life to that time. So, in all that, uh, so around the age of 7, and this was November of 1990, I believe, I got the news, and I don't know how long before I actually had to go that I got the news, but I got the news that I was going to be traveling to America. And so everybody was gathered around me. It was excitement at first. And that excitement got projected onto me. And I was excited. I was excited because everybody else was excited. But one of the reasons I was excited is because in my mind, it was still sort of far away. So I had time with my family. And it hadn't dawned on me, you know, that I was going to be going by myself. So the way it worked was they decided to bring each of us over one by one, starting with the youngest. Obviously, you know, the plan was to give me the best chance, since I was the youngest, best chance of coming to this country, assimilating, learning the culture, and having the best chance of success in the long run. The others were already older. They were already, you know, kind of, they were more advanced in school than I was. And so I could just have a fresh start, like I always been there. And that's exactly what happened in a way. Um, the speed at which I learned the language, the speed at which I learned the culture and assimilated, it was very quick. And that has a lot to do with the fact that I was so young. And when you're young, you absorb things very easily. You adapt. Well, I adapted. And I think, again, that goes back to my personality type. I adapted very quickly. And it seemed like it was working. I guess from my mom's point of view, it was working just fine. So to kind of get into how I got here, right, specifically. So when the time came for me to go, and the closer the time drew, the more nervous I became until the day it had to happen. And I remember being given a little backpack. I had a few belongings in there. My dad took me. He didn't bring any of my brothers and sisters. It was just me and him. He drove me to a place in Haiti I cannot remember, and we met with this man. I had seen this man before. He'd visited the house before, and thinking back on it, I think the only time I'd ever seen him was one time only, and it might have been because they were preparing and planning for this trip. I didn't realize it. I didn't know. I figured it was just another family friend visiting, and coming over to shoot the shit with my dad. So I never really made that connection until the day that uh, the meeting happened. I'll call it the meeting. So my dad drives me over to this place. We meet this man. I recognize him, but I don't know him. So to me, he's a complete stranger. And my dad hands me over to him. Now, I say it kind of crudely, but the arrangement had already been made. So the way this worked was, obviously I was too young to travel on my own on a plane, not knowing how to speak English, not knowing where I'm going. So they had to pair me with somebody who was already making this trip here to America. And specifically, he was coming to New York, where my mom lived. So it just was the perfect plan to bring me over safely. However, until we boarded the plane to come over to America, I had to go live with him and his family for about a week. Um, because traveling back and forth from his house to our house, it was pretty far away. The roads in Haiti aren't paved; they're pretty rough roads, so traveling is just not very convenient. So he didn't want to have to make the trip so many times, back and forth. I don't think it was possible. So the arrangement was I would go stay with him uh, for a week, and then we'd board the plane, come to America. So from that point, I think that's when my peace stopped. No longer any. I know I was no longer living in this happy-go-lucky world where I was cherished as the youngest and the cutest and all of that. I was now just from one moment to the next thrown from the life that I knew to an unknown world where I didn't know what to expect. I I recently described it. Thank God this was in the early '90s, before like human trafficking was so widely known and prevalent. Um, I often tell people like I don't know honestly. I didn't know honestly if this man was what this man was going to do. I mean, think of the possibilities. I didn't know if this man was, none of us really knew what this man's intentions would have been, and it could have gone any which way. But you know, we landed safely, and he brought me over to my mom. Now, during that time when I was living with him for that week, it was tumultuous, man. It was hard. I had never experienced emotions like that before. The experience of loss, the experience of hopelessness, the experience of not, like I said, not being tethered. You was just free falling. My whole world was just shattered, taken away from me as a child, and I didn't know what to make of it. Now I'm amongst all these strangers, and I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know where to go. So I spent that week. I cried. I cried my eyes off. Bawled, 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 bawled. Now, in all of that, and going through all of that, and this is probably my earliest memory of sort of people pleasing and being aware of what others might have been feeling or thinking without even being told. I remember feeling very uncomfortable that I kept crying all day long, and I remember thinking, man, they're gonna lose patience with me. I didn't feel safe because I wasn't part of this family, and so I didn't know how they would deal with me. I didn't know if they were getting tired of me. All these crazy negative thoughts run through your mind because, like, with my family, I know my family. Right? If I cry, somebody comes and holds me, hugs me, whatever. If I do this, I'm safe. I know what I can and cannot do within my own family. But within this family, it's strange. When I seen him yell at his kids, to me, it was like the end of the world. Oh my God. Like, I seen him punish his kids corporally. And I felt like, that could be me at any point. I felt like, if he could do that to his kids, what would he do to me? So I gravitated towards the mother of the house, because as a young boy, as a young child, in general, I think we tend to feel like women are softer, women are safer, and men, especially back then, they didn't show any emotion. They weren't the softest. You didn't pick up that vibe from them. So I kind of felt like, "Ooh, let me go over to the mom. She's the softer one. She'll protect me, hopefully, if he decides to come after me." And then I remember just trying to pull myself together, holding all of those emotions in so I didn't cry. Um, but at some point during that week, I started getting a little more comfortable, and my mood started to change a little bit. I got friendlier with the kids. They were friendly to me. I realized that they were really trying to help me feel comfortable, and so I kind of leaned into that. And just right around the time I was starting to get comfortable with them and understand them, it was time for us to go. So here I was again, paired with this man, by myself, with no one that I was familiar with, and we make the trip, you know, to the airport, board the plane to America. The one, I guess, the one silver lining in that experience during the plane ride was that I had never experienced being on a plane before. We had talked about it. You know, my older brother would tell us crazy stories like, "Hey, in America, everybody's rich, and mom one day is gonna come down here in a helicopter and take us all back to America. And as a kid, I'm eating this up. I'm like, oh yeah, hell yeah, let's go. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. And so, stark contrast to what I actually experienced being on this American Airlines plane with a complete stranger and nothing but strangers around me. Um, and the plane was huge. The food was great. I mean, if you traveled back then was the time to travel. It just was. Um, it was accommodating. People were nicer, more leg room on the planes. And this plane had three aisles, two rows in the middle. Well, no, one large row in the middle, and then you had the other rows on either side, and they had a movie screen showing movies. The flight attendants were nice. The food was great. It was great. It was great, except that I couldn't really enjoy it for what it was, um, because I was experiencing it completely different than what I had anticipated when my brother was telling me these stories. So get on the plane. So we land, walk through the airport a little bit. It was cold, so I'll go from tropical, warm tropical weather, humid, to complete cold, complete freezing outside. This was again November, and so New York would have been terribly cold, especially for me. I'd never experienced being cold like that. So, and as I say this, I see a lot of the parallels. You know, just being ripped from my family, thrown in the midst of strangers, and constantly being thrown in the midst of strangers, going from a warm tropical climate to this freezing cold climate. Just everything. There was no middle ground for anything. Everything was just complete shock all the way through. And I cannot tell you when the shock stopped. I can tell you I got used to it. I can tell you I kind of started learning how to deal with it, but I cannot tell you where it ultimately stopped, because I don't think it ever really stopped. My life has always been hard from that point, even till now. My life has always been hard. Um, it's Well, I look at everybody and it seems like their lives are on easy mode. My life has always been on hard mode, and I just always felt like every day I just had to get up and live life. I just had to get up and do what was expected of me, and that was pure sheer will, right? Nothing else but pure will. I was told I had to do this, so I did it. You don't think of it, and especially growing up in the '90s, that's just how you're kind of raised. You just do it for the sake of doing it. You know, sometimes parents would explain things to you, but other times you just did it because I said so. And that's not like today where you're explaining things to your kids and you know you're going through the whys and the reasons and all that stuff. No, we weren't given any of that. We were just go. That's it. Just go. So so we land, and he brings me over to my mom. So just to kind of illustrate, I go from family that I knew to strangers, and then from this point on, I'm dealing with nothing but strangers. And you have to understand, my mother, as well as a stranger, I saw her sporadically throughout the years, from I guess the age of 6 months old to a year to about seven. I didn't see her very much, and so here it is now. I'm having to go live with her permanently, away from the family that I had known, and I'm by myself. There's no buffer. There's no one there to make any kind of introductions, at all. And furthermore, when I got there was no debriefing. And people back then didn't really understand emotions. I think they felt like, or they didn't really put any thought you know, into children and how certain experiences could affect children. I think the expectation back then was just that you just did what you had to do. We came from that world. Haiti being a third world country, you just did what you had to do. And it felt like it was something that was meant to be understood from the earliest points of your life, and you just kept going with that. So there was no talking about my experience. There was no debriefing. There was no comforting or anything like that. My mom was nice, obviously, right? But f- for a child to go through that kind of an experience, you would think there would be a period where, okay, we have to help bring him along. We have to kind of, talk to him and get these feelings out and figure out, okay, what were you feeling like? How do you feel now? What's this? What's that? I didn't get that very much. From the moment I stepped foot in America, I felt like, I mean, I probably got like about a week or two of just, okay, no, nope, I didn't even get that because my mom was working full time. So I probably got maybe a couple days or so of just being able to let my hair down and relaxing a little bit and getting used to her, getting used to the apartment, the neighborhood, and things like that. Before once again I was thrown right into right into the midst of strangers. My mom had to go to work, so she had to drop me off to various babysitters throughout the week. So it was never the same person. Sometimes it'd be the same person for a while, but then it'd have to be somebody else because they had their own schedule, they had their own thing going on. So I was constantly being moved around and shipped from one person to the next, and I'm meeting all these strangers. It's just overwhelmed, overwhelmed. I remember crying a few times at certain people's houses. It was just like living that same experience all over again when I had to go live with that man and his family for a week. I bonded with the children. I bonded with the mothers. But as soon as the men would come home, I would clam up. I would become somebody totally different, right? During the day, if it was just me and the mom or me and the babysitter, we got along just fine. I adapted. We would joke around. I was someone that I don't even recognize now anymore. I was full of life, full of laughter, full of jokes, like I had this woman rolling on the floor, just saying the darnest things as a kid, and she loved me. But as soon as the husband would get home, all of that went away. I just didn't feel like I could be myself. I clammed up. I went into a corner, and so I don't know what they told my mom about having me there and the experience and all that, but it just that was pretty much my experience, right? So then I get enrolled in school, and now I'm thrown into the midst of a whole other situation, right? A bunch of kids who are already here, they already know how to speak English. I don't know how to speak English, so now it's just pressure on top of pressure on top of pressure on top of pressure. And I started feeling like, well, now looking back on it, the way I feel about that situation was it felt businesslike because just to touch on the whole immigrant life lifestyle and path. When you come to America, especially when the whole family comes over with children, it's like everybody has their responsibilities, right? The adults have the responsibility of you know securing shelter, money, food and things and those sort of necessities, clothing and things like that, right? But the children have a different responsibility. They're they're thrown out there into the culture, into the world, and their responsibility is to learn the culture, learn the language, and bring all that stuff back home to explain to the adults who don't know how to speak English, who are not as familiar with the culture. And it sort of makes sense because we go to school, we're inundated all day long with the culture in ways that the parents aren't. And we're younger, we're little sponges, and uh, we can absorb things a lot quicker. So we can learn the language a lot quicker. We can learn, the customs and things like that a lot quicker. And then we're used as like tools for the parents to navigate, this landscape. How do we pay bills? How do we read letters that come, that come to us from, you know, from I don't know, light bill or whatever. Answering phone calls that fell on us. You go out and you're buying stuff, whether it's clothing, groceries, or whatever. They take you along with them because you're the translator. So I learned. So being that I learned how to speak English pretty rapidly, that was the help. That was what I was able to contribute to my mom as a single mom, working. I think she was working 1 or 2 jobs at the time, so I was able to at least contribute that to help make her life a little easier. But that arrangement kind of set the tone for her and I's relationship. And the best way I could describe that relationship is like more sterile. Right? It was very businesslike. Um, my mom is not the softest person that I've ever known. Um, and that, of course, is due in part to her upbringing, uh, her childhood. She was thrown into chaos just like me. Her mom died very early on in her life, and then she was pulled out of school, and then she had to sort of become a surrogate mother to her entire family. So she was pulled out of school. She had to learn how to pretty much become a homemaker at 12 years old, and her father relied on her uh, to take care of those responsibilities, and that's been her, role ever since then. He got married, had kids. That was her role. Came to America, try to make a way for us. That was her role. So, needless to say, my mom didn't really have a whole lot. And then, of course, you take in the fact that she spent so much time away from me after I was born in my most formative years. We never quite bonded the way a child and mother should bond, right? And that's all due to situations, the situation of our lives, and just what we had to do. So, um, so that was the experience I had with her. Um, in the short time I spent with her by myself before my brother came along. So I guess that's a good start, um, to helping you understand a little bit about my background and the things that I'm going to eventually be touching on and talking about. Um, but to get back to the whole, I guess, midlife crisis thing, that gives you a reference point for how I ended up going through the things that I went through, and eventually why I felt like I needed to sit in front of this camera and start talking about it and getting some things out. I've written it out in journals before, but it feels a whole lot better when you get it out verbally. It's like releasing the energy in a way that writing does. It's good, but speaking it out loud, I think, does a better job at that. So I guess I'm gonna stop the video right there. I'll come back tomorrow with part 2 to this. We'll continue on about my time in elementary school, the experiences, and eventually get into a little bit about my own personality and how I viewed the world, and how that whole journey just kind of changed me over time from, like I said, the happy-go-lucky child to the person that you see in front of you now. And I'm continually evolving, continually changing, and continually learning more and more about myself to help bring me back. I guess what I'm trying to get to is I'm trying to get back to that peaceful time. I'm trying to get back to that time in my childhood when I knew what it was like to be carefree. I knew what it was like to just have nothing to worry about. And I didn't take it for granted either. And I've taken a lot of things for granted, as an adult. Um, and, I can look at that in different ways, because when you have experiences to compare to other experiences, it helps you appreciate the things that you once had, or even the things that you currently have. It helps you to remember not to take it for granted. That if you have even a moment of peace, if you have even a moment of happiness, um, in your life, cherish that. Just be in it. Just live in that moment. You know, because it can all go away like that. And for me, that's literally what happened. Just out of nowhere, all of a sudden, my life was turned upside down, and I had to adapt. So, um, as much as this was me just releasing, a certain energy, and helping me feel better and being part of my morning routine. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed the information, and there's more to come. I'll be getting in more in depth, and I think I'm going to write out some of these topics too, because going off the top of my head, I did very good this time, staying on track, but I tend to go off on tangents, and I think I'm going to start writing out what I want to touch on next time, so I can kind of give you a more linear timeline of my progression, my evolution from that early experience to till right now. So until next time, and I'm going to say this just so I can remember the name. Until next time, this is Between Two Worlds, and my name is Socrates. I'll see you guys next time.